After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, white is playing the Spanish opening, so f5. In this video we're gonna go through some stuff we haven't seen at all throughout the entire saga. Let's start with this one. So from the variation with d4, which is the main move, take the pawn, knight takes back, and as we know now we have to take, c6 attack the bishop. We've seen everything about this except one move, which is the novelty, bishop to a4. Now, in the past, we went through bishop c4 or bishop to e2. Either way, this is met with queen a5, winning a pawn. In this case, after bishop a4, there's a slight difference here. We do play queen a5 check. The only move now for white is knight to c3 to save the king and the bishop. But in this case, we don't take this pawn. We rather play bishop to b4, applying more pressure on that knight. Now, a move like bishop to d2 to reinforce the defense doesn't work because you'll be able to take the knight and then this bishop will be left without defense. You'll be able to win material. So two moves we're going to look at here. Obviously, queen d2, same problem. So one of the moves will be bishop retreating. The other one will be queen to d4, which is interesting. Let's start with queen to d4. So queen to d4, kind of puts some more defense over the bishop. And also develops the queen, attacks this pawn in e4. So what's happening here? Okay, take this bishop, since the knight is pinned. Now you might ask, okay, well, did black just win a piece? Did we just win a piece? No, well, the move now is bishop to d2, which is a great move, and the only move in this case to recapture the piece. Right now, we can't take the knight, swap everything because we'd lose the queen, and once the queen moves away, our best move now is queen a5. Anyway, how to proceed here, how to capitalize and win this game. Two moves we're going to look at. One of them, which is the top engine move, which is long castle. How to continue now? Simply develop, knight to e7, we're still up a piece. And after still best move by white, knight takes here, you just swap everything. If white allows you to trade, just trade everything, you're winning in material. If white continues the development, rook d2, this is now dangerous because white is threatening knight d6, a very strong check. Here you need to castle, don't be tempted to play in queen a2, you just got a castle here. And there's just nothing. So in this position, instead of long castling, for example, this move might seem possible for you. Knight e4 with the idea of going to d6. It's a very strong piece there. But now we just have to take the bishop. Now there's two ways to take back. If our opponent takes with the queen, right, you just swap everything. Take, and after king to d2, it looks like the knight d6 is coming. Well, you got to play knight h6. This is important because after knight d6 check, there's a very annoying move. King e7. And you're just okay. You're going to play rook f8. This bishop will find a way out. And the knight doesn't have another check in f5 because of the knight in h6. So in this position, after the check, what if white takes back with the knight and tries to keep the pieces on the board? Okay, knight e7 develop, castle, and now simply knight f5. And now the queen will have to move. If queen moves, let's say queen to f4, she still has to keep an eye on the knight and also attack our knight. Now we castle. And now a move like knight to c4 to attack the queen, to try and go to d6, you just play queen c5. There's nothing now, and you're just completely winning here. You're up a piece. If instead white plays knight to e4, which seems much better, you play knight to d4, discover attack on the queen, queen to g5, only move to remain relevant, but still you're gonna play d5. You conquer the center. That knight isn't going anywhere that can create any problem. You're just gonna enjoy the advantage, massive advantage. If white tries to one last attempt, take en passant, it looks like it makes sense. You take. This pawn though looks really dangerous. But now you take this pawn in c2, and after rook to d1, rook c1 is pointless. You're just gonna move the knight. And then you can defend the knight with the pawn c5 and b6. These pawns are going to defend each other. So after rook d1, the idea of playing d7, which is obviously a completely game-changing move. You play bishop d7, stopping the pawn from moving a3. Best attempt by white to prevent us from moving the knight anywhere. At the moment, we have no squares to go to, and so rook d2 will win the knight. So now we have to play rook f5, and when the knight obviously goes back, then you play c5, key move. So now we do have the shelter for the knight. However, our best move is rook takes f3. Pawn takes back, and now knight to d4. The knight is starting to go to f2. This can be defended. However, this is a completely winning endgame for the black player because it is impossible to dismantle this pawn chain. Position is evaluated like -4 or something. So I guess we can just move on at this point. And let's take it from the start. So e4, e5, and then the Spanish is happening, and we're looking at f4 and f5 and then d4 main line. So take, 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 c6, bishop a4, check, knight c3, and now bishop b4. What happens if our opponent doesn't do any of that mess as before and just plays bishop to b3? Okay, fine. Now recapture this pawn. And this is now a very similar scenario to some of the previous videos. We've already seen this pattern. So castle, now you just play d5. You got an amazing center. This move, rook e1, can be scary because white is threatening to play f3 and then put a lot of pressure over this pawn. The queen is like in a bad position, so you gotta speed up development. Knight f6. And let's look at this move. f4. Here now you make a check. This can be met in two different ways. If white blocks it, then this is bad because you can just take, and then queen takes pawn in f4. This pawn is not poisoned, the center is super strong, so there's nothing. So after the check, what if the king moves? Okay, fine. Queen e7 to save the queen, and that's it. You're gonna castle, everything is going to be just fine. You also have ideas like knight g4. We've seen scenarios like that. Let's look at this move, which is pretty crazy. It's a sacrifice someone made against me, and it kind of freaked me out for a bit. But obviously, I knew that I was supposed to be okay because so far, this is completely winning for black. I know the engine says it, but obviously, when my opponent played this move, knight takes d5, I had to think a bit. What was he threatening? Obviously, it was not going to be a good sacrifice. I knew that it was wrong, but I also needed to know how to react to it. So here you just take, and after bishop takes back, best move is bishop to g4. Because you see, the thing is that sacrifice is a knight for 2 pawns, but now you can't castle anymore. It's kind of scary for attacking the queen. And when the queen moves, rook to d8. And now we're finalizing the attack on this bishop. And we're going to be able to castle. Even if this bishop gets protected, you can just swap everything and then you castle. Another thing that, okay, just some quick mentions before we close this video. Just something we haven't seen before. So after f5, right, white now playing knight c3. Now we have seen this extensively. However, okay, after take, knight takes e4, knight f6. After knight takes and queen f6. Now there are two novelties that we haven't explored yet. One of them is bishop takes knight right now. The other one is castle immediately. Let's look at this one. Castle immediately. You play bishop e7. There are no other squares to go to for the bishop. Bishop c5 is not good. Because white is looking forward to playing d4. And when that happens, even if you can take, but then there's a check, it's bad. Bishop e7 is the best move. Also because after bishop c5 and d4, white can play bishop g5. You're going to have to move the queen and the knight's attacking. There's a lot of pressure over e5. It's horrible. So it's risky. Bishop e7 and now d4. Okay, here's the move. This is the key move. Knight takes d4. And now there's nothing. If knight takes in e5, this is a very scary sacrifice that happened against me, which is the main reason why I'm making this video now about this. However, the best move here is simply knight takes bishop. That's it. There's absolutely nothing for our opponent. So, our opponent will have to do something about it. Let's look at this move. Knight takes knight. Seems to be making sense. E takes d4. And now it's white to move. Let's explore a few options. If rook to e1, you simply castle. That's it. There's absolutely nothing. And you escaped every trouble. You're up a pawn with no compensation. Right? So we're going to drop the line there because there's no need to see, like, if your opponent just played a move that is just wrong and you punish it, then you're going to have to take the game from there. A move like bishop to c4 to stop us from castling is met with c6. Simple as that. You're going to play d5 and then you're going to castle. So now you know that it's impossible for white to prevent you from castling. So let's look at the key move here. The whole point is queen to h5 check. Yeah, the whole thing, please. After this check, here g6 is a weakening move. So you'd rather play king to d8. Because, not castling the king is not weakening at all. Jokes apart, it's completely safe to do that. Rook to e1 now. Rook to f8. We are fine. Our king is safe. Putting a lot of pressure over f2. What to do? Rook to e2. Defends that. h6. Stop potential annoying bishop g5 ideas in the future. Stops the infiltration of the queen to h7. bishop d2 developing and trying to pile up the rooks. c6, kick the bishop away. This cannot be ignored. The rook cannot just go to e1 and ignore the bishop, because after bishop takes, the rook doesn't have a double attack on this bishop, since this allows us to checkmate next move. So back in this position, instead of rook piling up, what if white doesn't ignore the bishop and just saves it to a4, where you play b6, and then you will be able to play bishop a6, and the king will just stay as safe as ever and remove the rook from that diagonal, which allows us to go to f2 and win the game. So instead of bishop a4, what if white plays the most sensible move, bishop back to d3? Okay, d5. And now you got huge control of the center. Rook a to e1. This looks like white is very well placed. And this is, by the way, the absolute best possible line for the white player, which is why I kept it for the very end of this saga. Bishop to d6 comes now. Best move by white now is rook e8 check. Don't take that rook, of course. You have to play king to c7. And after best move, rook takes, bishop takes is best. Obviously, you don't want to play with the queen, because then rook e8 is annoying. And now, if white plays rook to e8, that just loses, because bishop g4 comes with an attack on the queen, and also we come with an attack on the rook, so we're winning material. If instead queen to e8, which is the best engine move once again, rook to b8, getting the rook protected by the king so that we can develop the bishop finally. g3 by white with the idea of playing bishop f4. These are all best moves, but you play bishop to d6 now, and bishop to f4 is still the best move by white. If we take now, we're also allowing the arrival of the pieces here, the rook to c7 and stuff like that. So here, obviously you don't want to take, play bishop to d7. There's an attack on the rook. On the queen. The queen will have to move. What if bishop check? Queen takes back, and when the queen goes away, queen to e7. But either way, we're just finalizing a won game, right? Queen to e7. You just play rook e8, swap everything. You're completely winning. And it's not like this could have been avoided. After this discovered attack, the queen had gone to f7 with the idea of putting more pressure on that pawn. Then you will play rook f8, everything's safe, and you're not going to lose the pawn advantage that you have. Queen taking in g7 appears to be possible, and it is. But then you're going to play queen f6, you're threatening this in f2, and you threaten the queen, so the queen is forced to swap. And you have a massive majority on the queen side, although the opponent has a majority on the king side. This is white's absolute best variation, and you're going to have to take the game from here. So if white plays only the absolute best moves for every single situation, every single move, then this will be drawish. It is quite equal. It's still slightly better for black, but you've come all the way so far learning about the Schliemann Gambit. You've learned so much. And the idea that your opponent, at whatever rating you're playing, the idea that your opponent will get to play only stockfish moves for 20 plus moves is obviously never going to happen. And if it does, make sure you report them for cheating. So let's conclude this video with the final line. The only one of the only ones we haven't seen at all. There will be maybe some other extras, but probably not at this point. Knight c3, take, knight f6, and after the knight swapping everything, bishop takes in c6. Okay, so our opponent is just swapping everything. It's pretty boring, but we have to just briefly mention this is really not good for white, by the way, because that's what happens when you swap every piece. You're losing the initiative. So here, white might play this move, which is d3 to allow development of the bishop. It's a completely normal move, right? But then we play bishop g4. Now, before we get into d3, let's see white h3, which seems like a very natural move here. Why is it wrong? Because h3 stops bishop g4, and this knight is there to stay, putting pressure on the isolated pawn. So h3 looks very reasonable. But in this specific case, because white has no pieces, since there was, white swapped so much, he decided to take everything from us. Fine. You play queen to g6, you're winning a pawn. White can't castle, because then bishop to h3. And there's no like middle move here, or like in between move or something. Bishop takes here, knight h4, protecting the mate and attacking the queen, just doesn't do anything. You play queen to g5, you're going to take the knight. The king is going to be completely open, completely exposed, so there's no point. And here in this position, after queen to g6, we just won a pawn. It is what it is. You might wonder, what about knight to h4, defending the pawn and attacking the queen? Well, this now begins an incredibly complicated number of moves that should take us to victory in a very slow and complicated way. Queen e4 wins the knight. So I was joking. Anyway, so you might argue, what about g4 by white? Or maybe what about knight takes pawn? Okay, fine, just taking g2. And now the move queen h5 check just doesn't work. Because, you know, the pawn and the queen are both defending the square g6. There's nothing there. And besides, even if you were to allow the queen to go and take the rook, but then you're taking this rook with following development of your bishops, and it's obviously game over. Here, obviously, a move like rook to h3, rook to f1 doesn't work because you're just going to play bishop h3 check, and then you're piling up the attack on this queen, on this rook. There's nothing to do, it's completely lost. But let's look at this variation, the one with queen check. Just to clear the doubts, you play g6. And after the knight takes the pawn, now you might argue, okay, if we do take back, then queen e5 wins the rook. Maybe it's a bit complicated, but in reality, your best move now, as a matter of fact, is to just take the rook with check, and then you'll deal with this knight later on. The best move here by white instead is not after queen h5 check g6. The best move is obviously not this one. It's rather queen to f3 and forcing a swap basically. So we have to accept the swap. And now thinking about it, we're equal in material, but we've got the bishop pair and a better pawn structure. We're going to play bishop to g7. Position is evaluated around -2. You're going to have to take the game from here. There's too many things that can happen now. But, you know, obviously you're completely safe. This pawn check is safe. You're not going to be attacked. There's no majority for our opponent. And you're going to be able to castle, get the rooks on open files much quicker than your opponent can. So let's go on. So in this position, you might argue, what about g4 to stop us from getting that pawn? Okay, you develop. You play bishop c5. And after d3, castle. Well, obviously castling here is not advisable. It's horrible. You can play h5. I mean, it's game over already. So queen to e2 developing. Maybe trying to castle long, but it's too late. You play e4. And now when the knight moves, you've got double attack on f2. Well, obviously white is not going to take the queen because you can swap queens and then you're winning this knight for free. So what if pawn takes? Okay, queen to f7, finalizing the pressure over this knight. You're going to win the knight unless the knight moves. And this is a much better endgame for black. The advantage is not huge. So the knight will have to move, honestly, to save itself. But you can just take the pawn in f2. We've got triple attack on that pawn. And after take, this is just a much better endgame for black. Position evaluated as if black was up a piece, almost. So to conclude this video, let's look at the last line. So in this position, earlier we went through h3 and white's attempt of saving material, saving the game, but that doesn't work. What about d3? Now here we can get to play bishop g4. So it's inevitable. Either the thing is that white shouldn't have swapped all these pieces. You know, the knight in f6, the bishop in e6. White shouldn't have swapped them. Okay, because that's the reason why now it's just too late for white to play a good game. Bishop to g4. And now, if h3, kicking the bishop away, keep the pin. g4, okay, too late. Bishop f7, and now we're winning because nothing stops us from playing bishop d5, and I mean it. Nothing stops us. A move like c4 is absolutely weakening because after you castle long, you'll be putting pressure on this pawn. You'll be playing e4. It's completely winning. White is not recommended because also white will not be able to castle anywhere. Let's look at this attacking move. Best move, bishop to g5. Crazy enough here the move comes. Bishop to b4 check. We leave our queen hanging and also c3 will hang our bishop. What's going on? Queen to g6 comes now. We don't care that we lose the bishop. Why? Because now you play bishop to d5, attacking this knight, and then this bishop will be free to be taken. If white saves the bishop, you castle, finalizing the pressure on this knight. That knight can't really move anywhere because then you will be winning the rook in h1. So if the bishop doesn't go to h4 but rather goes, let's say, okay, bishop to e3, fine, you play queen to f6, finalizing the pressure on this knight. Again, this knight can't move anywhere because he will just take the rook. So if let's say rook to g1, well, now you do take the knight, bishop f3. The good thing is that the queen will have to move. The funny thing is that our opponent will not be able to castle at all. So what about none of that? What about if our opponent, in this position, instead of moving the bishop back anywhere, he just plays rook to g1. Okay, castle. Got loads of pressure on this knight, but it looks like now the knight can be saved. Well, if the knight gets saved, then you can take this bishop. It's a much better position for black. If the knight gets defended, let's say rook g3, queen f7, finalizing the pressure on that knight. We've got so many attackers, the king can't go and help the defense, obviously. So we are going to win a piece. Although we're down a piece. So if the bishop goes back, we will take this knight. The queen will have to move. Whatever, anywhere, doesn't really matter. This is the best possible variation for our opponent in this specific line. And obviously, we'll have to close the line here. There's too many things that could potentially happen at this point. So we're going to have to drop the line here. But obviously, we have a substantial advantage here. White king is in some trouble. So let's just look at the very last mention. Here in this position, we went through, after bishop g4 attacking the knight, we went through h3. What if our opponent tries to just go on, say like, I'll try the castle alongside or something. Here you still play bishop h5. And obviously, going to d2, it's impossible for white to castle long, because then you'll be able to take the knight in f3. So castle normally, okay, bishop to d6. And it's just, this spin is so amazing, right? We're going to be able to do this anytime you want, and then double up and isolate the pawn of our opponent. At the moment, we prefer to keep the bishop at queen e2, developing castle, finalizing the pressure on that knight, and that's how you win this game. That's why our opponent shouldn't have swapped anything. There is no counterplay here. A move like d4 will simply be met by e4, winning the game on the spot. There's nothing for white. Obviously, you'll have to take it from here, but there's a substantial advantage for black.